All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It is 12:01. We will get started. My name is Jenny Disson. I'm the Director of Engagement for a research institute that is part of NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The Research Institute is a long-term cooperative institute partner working with NOAA on a number of different initiatives, including the NOAA NCEI Industry Initiative. This particular webinar, Welcome to the 2026 NOAA Hurricane Seasonal Outlook webinar, is part of this initiative, and I'm very pleased to moderate today's discussion and webinar. I would like to begin by highlighting the fact that this is our third webinar that we have hosted since the program started about 3 years ago, and where it was initially identified as a topic of interest from retail industry, we have expanded into opening the opportunities for many other participants nationally and potentially internationally. Many of you may be familiar that the NOAA has a NOAA National Hurricane Center, which issues the forecast for the current season and also leads into discussions of how hurricane seasons are changing over time. We have a couple of different goals for today's webinar, which we'll cover here shortly. A couple of housekeeping things to go over first. Number one, this webinar is being recorded and made publicly available. You will see information identified in the chat feature. My colleague Vanina here is going to put information and resources in the chat. Please be looking out for it. So you can find the recording at the NOAA NCEI Impacts webpage. We ask that individuals please do not unhide your video. If you do, we will have to ask you to sign a release form. We're okay with that if you're okay with that. Otherwise, we will not be able to make the video public. There are a couple of components. We encourage an interactive dialogue today. As noted here, your cameras and microphones are disabled. Please do use the chat feature. During the Q&A portion, we will guide you to using that Q&A feature out of Google Meet. And we have covered all of our housekeeping. So with that, I welcome you to today's webinar and would like to first introduce you to Allison Crimmins. She is the Executive Director of the NOAA Industry Initiative Program, which was formerly known as the Industry Proving Grounds. Allison, take it over.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks for having me, and I'm excited to have this nice cross-line office webinar to bring us all together today. So I'm just going to talk for 2 or 3 minutes here just to give you a little bit of a teaser about our industry partnership work. We have been collaborating with industry leaders across 3 different sectors, so the architecture and engineering, the insurance and reinsurance sector, and the retail sector, and working with them to understand their data needs and priorities, and then to co-develop new data products or update existing resources and decision support tools to help those industries become more resilient and also build resilience in the communities that they serve. Next slide, please. So the way that we have done this work for the last few years, I think is somewhat unique in the federal government in that it is really close to co-production. It's really involved a lot of engagement with all of these sectors. So we met with them early on to understand their needs. We bring them into working groups that meet regularly. We rely on them to help conduct user tests as we are developing our products and gathering feedback all along the way. I think we've collected more than 1,000 unique data needs and user needs and feedback as we've been developing the new tools as part of the industry partnership work. So really close relationship with each of these sectors. And it's not just new tools or new dashboards. I think along the way we also learned from our sectors that maybe what they need is a webinar series like the one here. And I think we have helped to elevate a lot of the different expertise and work going on around NOAA and help deliver that and make it very accessible to our industry users. So that's why you're all here today. So my last slide is just, that was a very quick teaser. If you could go, yeah, thanks. That was just a quick teaser on our program, but if you want to learn a lot more, we are hosting a 3-day industry partnerships summit in Silver Spring, Maryland, from September 1st to 3rd. And there's a QR code there. We really encourage you, we love the retailer folks on this call to join us in person in Silver Spring. There will also be a virtual option if you're unable to travel. But you'll get to hear a lot more about the work we've done. You'll get to see demos of the tools, and you'll get to hear a lot of really interesting conversations happening between NOAA and the different industries who are using our data to make important business decisions every day. So with that, let me hand it back to you, Jenny, and or over to Matthew.
Hi, Allison. How you doing? Yeah, so I'm Matt Rosencrantz. I'm NOAA's lead for the seasonal hurricane outlook, and I'll be walking you through that and how we make that forecast and some new developments we've had this year. So next slide. So overall, our outlook does call for that below normal hurricane season. 75% odds of being below normal. 7 to 13 named storms, which normal is 14. We have 2 to 6 hurricanes forecast, and normal for that is 7. Major hurricane 0 to 2, excuse me, and normal for that is 3. So we are looking at things to be on the low end this year, and I'll get into the factors for that coming up. Our accumulated cyclone energy, which is our measure for the total seasonal energy, it's literally the wind and all the hurricanes. We square it, sum it up, and add that all together throughout the season, see how much energy is coming out of the tropics. That is forecast this year to be 30 to 90% of normal. So again, that's that below normal season. So if we go to the next slide, that 30 to 90%, okay, so that was a different order. These are the factors behind that forecast. Some of the biggest things that we're looking at this year are a competing El Nino, and it's really not even a competing El Nino, it's a dominating El Nino. Because El Nino is forecast to be so strong this year, we're at very high odds of a very strong El Nino event. I can look that up right now. And so that's like we are at a 90% chance of a very strong El Nino event, which means a Nino 3-4 temperature of 2.0 degrees. It would be on the top 5 events that we have since 1950. So that's how strong that event would be. This is a once a decade, once every kind of 2 decades kind of event in the El Nino. So that's why it's going to be such a dominating factor this year. What the El Nino does is it really increases the wind shear dramatically over the Caribbean, and a little bit up into the Gulf, and a little bit also kind of east of the Windward and Leeward Islands out there. So it makes it very hostile to tropical storms developing over top of the Caribbean. A little bit further out in the Atlantic, we are expecting the sea surface temperatures to be, slightly above normal, but we're also expecting trade winds to be near normal, which kind of increases wind shear and keeps waves and thunderstorm complexes moving along, doesn't really let them kind of come together and develop into tropical storms. We're also expecting a neutral West African monsoon. So right now, the West African monsoon for the last 20 days has been right at near normal, right to the long-term averages. It's not in a enhanced phase. It's not any more favorable towards tropical storms. There's not that much more rains coming in West Africa or Central Africa than normal. So again, that's normal, slightly warmish sea surface temperatures, but a big dominating El Nino. And that's what leads to our forecast of below normal temperature or below normal seasonal hurricane activity. Next slide. Trying to keep on time here. Just this gives a context, right? So the right-hand bar there for August forecast, that 30 to 90% of normal, that gives the context of where that would fall going back to 1950. This would be the first, if we end up with below normal, this would be the first time we've had below normal activity since 2015. So it's been almost a decade since we've had below normal activity. We've had one near normal year in there in 2022, and most of the last decade has been above normal. That is due to the fact that we've had multiple La Nina events, and we have the warm sea surface temperatures and very favorable wind conditions over the Atlantic. That's kind of that background phase of the high activity era. So that's kind of setting the stage for that past decade to be very busy. And then you compound that with multiple repeated La Nina events where it removes wind shear and makes the Atlantic more favorable. You just had the right setup for many, many, many busy years. Next slide. Sea surface temperatures, that kind of bears out the pattern. Upper pattern is the sea surface temperatures for the Pacific and the Atlantic. You can see the El Nino right across the Pacific there in the black box. The sea surface temperatures are just very warm, 1.5 to almost, some of those pictures, some of those pixels in there are almost 2 degrees already. When I go down, look down in the ocean, vertically, there are some temperatures that are 8 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, so 4 to 5 degrees Celsius above normal. So there's just a large reservoir of warmth also underneath that. That's just can come up to the surface and kind of reinforce this. For the sea surface temperatures in the Atlantic, right, generally the Atlantic is just kind of near normal if you average the entire red box. If I look in just the tropical Atlantic, it's been warm, it's been cool. It's not really strong in any way. And relative to the rest of the global tropics, it's cool. So that means generally you're going to have general sinking motion over the cooler oceans and rising motions over the warmer parts of the ocean. And that's where we get all the thunderstorms and much more rising motion over the Pacific and sinking motion over the Atlantic, which is detrimental to hurricanes. Next slide. When we look at the models that we run going out to the future, how are those sea surface temperatures going to evolve? Some of the models here have it in the National North American Multi-Model Ensemble, which is about 200 members, 200 models for the future, has about 3 degrees above normal. When we look at our latest internal NOAA model, our seasonal model developed off the Unified Forecast System, that's getting up, it peaks at around 2.6, which would be a record for that time. So some of the models are forecasting record events. And there would be, would have, take all the typical impacts you have from El Nino and just make them kind of more certain and more intense. That's kind of the takeaway from that. Next slide. When I look at how does that translate to wind shear, all the red areas here are much higher wind shear, right? We're seeing that's what these graphics show. I'm seeing 10 meters per second wind shear over top of the Caribbean. That's wind shear. That's an anomaly. So that's wind shear on top of the normal wind shear that exists there. And that 10 meters per second is about the what you want to see in just in a normal condition to have a tropical storm form. And this is forecast to be 10 meters per second, even more on top of that. So it's about, the total would be about 2.5 times the threshold that you'd want for tropical storms. So it's not very conducive. The other side to that is looks like there's lower wind shear near the northern parts of the Gulf and off the east coast of the US. And that is where you can actually get tropical cyclone formations, preferentially during El Nino years. So we've already had 3 that were kind of short-lived near the Gulf. We had Cristobal recently up in the extratropics. Those are the kinds of storms you tend to get more during El Nino years. Doesn't mean a large, tropical storm and a hurricane isn't possible to develop in that low shear area, but you typically get the shorter-lived, weaker storms in the area near the Gulf, kind of where it's shown in blue in these plots, near the southeast coast of the US. Next slide. More talks into the West African monsoon here. If we look on the left-hand side here, the black line is the climatology. The red line is the latest measured position. And the purple line is where it was 10 days before that. So we've seen that the West African monsoon has kind of slid right to where it's near normal. And that's, again, it's neither super favorable nor not favorable for tropical cyclone development because it's right near normal. Our modeling system going forward in the future, there's not very many colors in Western Africa there. There's, just like a couple speckles of dry conditions and a couple of speckles of green, wet conditions represented by the green colors there. So again, no strong signal in the model that the monsoon is going to just keep intensifying or dramatically change from its near normal position. Next slide. So that was a seasonal outlook, right? That's what's taking us out through the end of June, or at the end of November. If you want to talk about something that's a little bit closer in time period, next 2 to 3 weeks, the Climate Prediction Center puts out the Global Tropics Hazards Outlook. It's updated every Tuesday at about 3 p.m. on our website. And this highlights here in the red areas of tropical cyclone formation that are likely in the next 2 weeks out and 3 weeks out. The probabilities are indicated by the level of shading. The stripes are the lower probabilities, 20 to 40%. Solid red is 40 to 60, and the deeper kind of maroon, brownish kind of red is greater than 60% chance of a tropical cyclone formation. These are highly coordinated with the National Hurricane Center. They're on the calls, we're on their calls to make sure that what they have out through day 7. The end of week 1 is logically follows into week 2 here, and the week 3 models here, right? That's modeling that we have here into the Climate Prediction Center. And the latest I just grabbed from yesterday does show a lot higher odds in the Eastern Pacific and only kind of marginal chances in the Atlantic, and even well far out into the Atlantic. So it doesn't look like any immediate threats for the coastline of North America. Next slide. Some things we're also working on. A replacement for the climate forecast system. It's called the seasonal forecast system. We have this in-house right now. We have 39 model simulations that we run in April, 39 in July, but we've also run a hindcast of them, 1991 through 2025. So we have all those same 39 simulations for all of those past years, so we can have a good assessment to calibrate. We can also assess, risks of storms, how frequent storms are in certain areas. Are there biases in the models? Do the models take it too far north, or do they take it too far south? Are the counts of the storms over the years right on par? And the graphic in the bottom right is the forecast from this year. The April initial conditions in the light blue line started out, right, had a couple storms in the beginning, 1 or 2 through June, and then it had, just 1 or 2 storms each month throughout the rest of the season, which would led it to a below normal season. The July initial conditions started with a total of 2, which we already had 2 by the time we ran the model. We had Cristobal was a 3rd, and it shows just again another 1 or 2 each month and another below normal season. So almost 80 of those model runs from our latest model are showing that below normal season. Next slide. And just a reminder, just kind of why this, we'd like to talk about this, and where we can learn from this. We're the deaths from tropical storms, right? Like I know we talk a lot about protecting stuff, but we can replace stuff, but we can't replace people. So we really want to emphasize that, being safe during and after storms. And one of the bigger threats is turning into freshwater flooding, which is largely from the rains, inland rainfall. So when people even if you're not near the coast, you need to be very aware of tropical storms and tropical activity, because it can just bring a deluge of water, 500, even 1,000 miles inland. Years ago, there was bridges washed out in Vermont from the remnants of a tropical storm or remnants of a hurricane that, then tropical storm and just became remnants. So you can have impacts very, very far away. So the more we're all kind of looking at this and understanding what's coming at us, the better off we can be prepared. Next slide. So next is my colleague Dan Brown from the National Hurricane Center.
Hey, thanks, Matt, and thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon. I'm going to cover kind of the progress so far of the 2026 hurricane season. Matt gave a good overview of the conditions that we have been seeing and are expecting to see for the rest of the season. We'll give you that recap, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the product updates that we've done here at the Hurricane Center for this hurricane season. So we go to the next slide. We'll dive right in, and we can see that across the Atlantic, things have been pretty quiet. Again, that was kind of as expected from what the seasonal forecast issued back in May was indicating. We've had only 3 named storms so far, but all 3 of those have been kind of on the lower end, so on the low end tropical storms. But 2 of those did impact portions of the U.S. and the Gulf Coast. We also had Cristobal, which was a short-lived high latitude systems out of the Atlantic, staying away from land. But we have been seeing that strong wind shear that Matt talked about across the main development region, and it's really prevented any development across the deep tropical Atlantic so far. If we go to the next slide, kind of looking at how has the season been progressing, and you can see that we are starting to get kind of behind schedule So we had Arthur form on June 16th. Typically, the first storm of the season forms around June 20th. So it was kind of, it was close to being on time, and really Bertha as well. But Cristobal, it formed about a week or 10 days later than what we normally see the third storm. And at this point, we were waiting for our fourth storm to form, and we're starting to get more behind where you see there it comes to the number of named storms for each season. We have not had any hurricanes to date, so also behind there. And of course, major hurricanes we typically don't see until we get more into the real peak of the season, which is more the very late August, September, and October time period. I will say that this is the time period right around now that we really start to see the bulk of the activity for the Atlantic. So again, I think we would expect to see some activity here over the next couple of months. Although again, as the season as a whole, we are expecting below normal activity across the Atlantic. If we go to the next slide, we'll talk a little about what those impacts have been in the U.S. so far. So we did have Tropical Storm Arthur. It formed in June. It actually formed right along the Texas coast, but it did bring some a very heavy rainfall to parts of the southeastern United States, especially to Louisiana. It was really the remnants. So Arthur kind of moved inland across eastern Texas, but the remnants of that system did combine with a frontal system to produce some very heavy rainfall across parts of Louisiana and other portions of the southeast U.S. Back in June. So it did have impacts. Again, it shows that it doesn't take a hurricane to have significant impacts. Tropical Storm Bertha formed in July. It kind of skirted along the northern Gulf Coast, moved into Louisiana, and then also moved into eastern Texas. There was a lot of wind shear over that system, and you can see from that satellite picture that a lot of the heavy shower and thunderstorm activity was south of the center, remaining over water. But there were some impacts. It did bring tropical storm force winds to portions of the northern Gulf Coast. So again, two lower end tropical storms, but both bringing some impacts to the United States so far this year. If we move to the next slide, I will tell you that things have been very different out in the East Pacific and Central Pacific, and I'll mention this because of what recently occurred out in Hawaii. Right now, across the two basins combined, the Eastern and Central Pacific, we've had 9 named storms, 3 hurricanes, and actually, as of last night, we just got our second major hurricane as Hurricane Lala strengthened into a Category 4 storm. Out here in the Pacific, things are running above the long-term means. That was also expected, and we're expecting that the Eastern Central Pacific basins will remain active. We've had a couple systems early in the season that brought impacts to Mexico, but if you've been following the news recently, you'll know that Hurricane Lala did bring wind and rain impacts to the Hawaiian Islands. Those islands are still recovering. If you go to the next slide, can talk a little bit about that. Pretty unusual to get a hurricane to impact the Hawaiian Islands, but Lala did form in the Central Pacific. It moved kind of westward, then northwestward. The center moved just south of the big island of Hawaii when it was a Category 1 hurricane. There were a lot of hurricane force gusts, especially on the elevated locations on the island and even some of the other islands. And several locations on the big island received more than 25 inches of rain with a maximum of over 43 inches. So again, very impactful event for Hawaii. And if you followed our tropical weather outlook, you'll note that we have another area highlighted to the southeast of Hawaii. And it's possible that the next system that's expected to form over the next couple of days and through this weekend could bring even more rain and impacts to Hawaii. So something we're monitoring. And again, it's those El Nino conditions that are causing this heightened activity across really the Pacific as a whole, both the Western, Central, and Eastern Pacific basins. So if you move to the next slide, we will begin to talk about what are some of those product changes that we've made for this hurricane season. So I'm going to cover really quickly some updates to our cone product. I'll talk about some new storm surge products for Hawaii, some that we just used this past weekend, and then also a new mobile-friendly website that I think really helps modernize some of our products on the web. So if you move to the next slide, we'll get right into those. And one thing if you followed us kind of the last couple of years, you'll note that we have been doing some updates to our cone graphic. One of those, we had an experimental cone the last couple of seasons to where we highlight not only the coastal areas that were under watches and warnings, but also the inland areas. And that portion of the cone became operational this year. So you can see from this Hurricane Milton case on the screen that it really shows you what those watches and warnings. So it shows you where the hurricane, tropical storm watches and warnings are across the Florida Peninsula. In this case, previously we just painted a little strip along the coast, but again, this shows you what the inland extent of that wind risk is. And if you were following along during Hurricane Lala this past weekend in Hawaii, you would have seen that it actually painted the entirety of the Hawaiian Islands in that watch and warning. Again, giving folks a better representation of what the wind risk is when there is a hurricane threatening. So again, this is operational this year. It's part of our cone graphics whenever we issue those and whenever we issue watches and warnings for the United States. If we go to the next slide, I'll talk about a different version of the cone that is available this season as an experimental cone. The Hurricane Center cones always been constructed about using our 5-year average track and intensity errors to provide information about uncertainty. So one thing with our errors is we typically have more difficulty forecasting the timing of when an event will arrive versus maybe the location. There's less usually left or right errors. There is that timing error, which is called a long track error. So this new cone is constructed slightly different, where it takes those errors into account, and it really is a better representation of that forecast uncertainty. So what it means for you, if you're looking at this, is it means maybe a slightly slightly wider cone, because what we did is we've incorporated now about 90% of that uncertainty versus what was about 2/3 of the uncertainty previously. So one can now say this is, the cone encompasses the most likely track rather than what was previously kind of the possible track of the storm. And so it's a little bit wider and it's a little bit longer, but it really, again, accounts for more uncertainty, a better representation of that uncertainty. And we're issuing this year as an experimental product to get the feedback. So far, the feedback's been pretty positive, and it's likely something that we're going to be exploring to make operational in the next season or two, but something I encourage you to look at this hurricane season. And then if you move to the next slide, if there is folks that have interest out in the Hawaiian Islands, we are now issuing the storm surge, all the storm surge products that we issue for the Hawaiian Islands now. So we are able to now issue a storm surge watch and warning for Hawaii, much like we were for the last about decade for the continental U.S. And then we also issue what's called the peak storm surge graphic. That's the one here in the middle. That provides you what the storm surge range is for coastal areas. And then the last product is this potential storm surge flooding map, which really provides you with the worst case. You can actually zoom in on that map to look at areas where you can see storm surge, and provides that reasonable worst case scenario of what the storm surge inundation could be from the storm. So all those products are now available for the Hawaiian Islands. Again, that's new this year, and just again shows how we're expanding our support out to areas that are outside of the continental United States. If we move to the next slide, we'll talk here briefly about a new website that we're beginning to push out. So we've had a mobile site before, but it wasn't very user friendly. So this newer website that we're beginning to experiment with is now on that mobile site. So if you go to hurricanes.gov and put a /mobile, you can see this today. And it is one thing that's nice about it is that the page will scale to whatever kind of device you're looking at. So if you're looking at a desktop, tablet, or phone, it will actually scale, which the previous website did not. So you can check that out. If you move to the next page, or next slide, you can see some examples of that. So there you can see the kind of examples of how it resizes. It's also, I think, a lot more user-friendly. We're able to, like last week when we had Hurricane Lala threatening Hawaiian Islands, we were able to put that information up front and center on the page. So you can look at that again if you go to hurricanes.gov/mobile you can see that today. And eventually, I think our website will look like this, but we're using the mobile site right now as the experimental page to be able to test out the new functionality and get feedback on this new web construction. So the next slide just wraps me up, but thanks. Again, remember, we're almost we're entering the peak of the hurricane season. It's really the next few months. It only takes one storm to hit your area for it to be a bad year. We saw that here in 1992 with Hurricane Andrew. We only had 7 named storms, but one of those was Andrew. It was pretty devastating here in South Florida. So just remember, please be prepared and keep doing what you're doing to make sure you and your family and others are prepared this season. And from that, I'll turn it back over to our moderator.
All right. Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Matthew. So much happening. The hurricane information is really relevant to our industry partners as they think about preparedness, but also learning from the past and thinking about how we will manage not only this season, but also our future seasons. So the upcoming product changes and the cone of uncertainty changes is really, really helpful. A reminder to everyone that we are recording this, and this will be accessible and available on the NOAA NCEI Impacts website. Okay, so with that, couple of things. We are transitioning over into the roundtable discussion. So this is the formal Q&A, what we call the engagement discussion portion of the webinar. What that means is that we get to interact with you. And whereas you get to see me, I don't get to see you. So please use the Q&A feature of this particular web platform. At the bottom right of your screen, you should see 9 dots. Those 9 dots, when you click on it, there should be a Q&A component that is called Q&A. Click on it, please type your questions, and please interact with us. We invite this opportunity for you to please raise comments, questions, offer remarks, tell us what you like, don't like, tell us what you want to see. Do more of this, do less of that. We are going to kick off the discussion and the roundtable by inviting and introducing Gabriel Marcus from Costco, who is part of our panel today. Gabriel, thank you for being part of this discussion, and thank you for Costco for talking about hurricane preparedness. Can you please tell us about yourself, your role, what you do for Costco, and how you're thinking about hurricane season for this year?
Sure. I've been at Costco since 2002, and I've had a variety of roles. I came to home office in 2008 from a warehouse location while I was getting my master's degree from UMBC and emergency management. And basically, when I came here, they were still tracking hurricanes on paper charts. And I'm like, GIS, like, what's GIS? So basically, that was an introduction by me to GIS for Costco, and it's been a positive change. So for basically, I for my current role, I do a few other things than what I'm going to describe. Basically, there's a four slices of a pie: preparedness, awareness, response, recovery, mitigation. So I do the preparedness and awareness. So I'm tracking hurricanes or tropical cyclones all over the world, all the world and the countries we're in. We're in 13 countries. So basically, I prepare a briefing statement to the managers and let them know what's going on. And that time period starts when tropical storms get like a designation, and then it ends when there's no more threat to our facilities or personnel.
Thank you. So this is a global issue for you and for Costco. And I think it's interesting to note that it begins with a digital version of GIS map. And we like to make some of this information easily embedded within your existing systems. And when I say you, for our participants, a lot of what we want to do is provide data and information products and resources that can easily integrate with your existing systems. When we think about NOAA and NOAA NCEI, a lot of our data has different formats, different types of data, different types of information. Some of it is raw, some of it is value added, some of it is in a visualized format. It may not always work for your existing systems. We are often challenged with how can we make our information discoverable, utilizable, obviously fair, and following the FAIR principles. But the goal here is for easy access and ease of use. Can you tell us, Gabriel, when you have looked at hurricane season in the past and this current year and for preparedness, what lessons have you learned from prior seasons in terms of how Costco has prepared, and what and how you think you might do things differently? And the follow-up question to that is, how has NOAA's information and resources been helpful and productive? And some sort of comment regarding what you might want to see differently from NOAA.
Well, I guess for lessons learned, I mean, it's always important for our buildings. Like, you got to do your pre-season inspection. Got to inspect the roofs. Got to inspect the drains. Make sure they're cleared out. We have scuppers on our roof, which, if you're not familiar with that term, basically just like a hole in the parapet that water can drain off. So those are all important things to be aware of. Most people who are warehouse managers in the Florida, Texas, Alabama, places like that, they know these things. They do them all year round. But we have other managers that come in from New York State, New York City. Like, they know their area weather, but like they don't really know about hurricanes. So we always block pallets like with our roll-up doors, just because there's it's a lot of wind on the on a not a really reinforced door. So one thing we learned, or they learned, don't put dry dog food there, because dry dog food will expand and burst the bag. So imagine you have a pallet of wet dog food that's exploded on your floor. It's like a sticky, gooey mess. So this lesson learned that they will never forget. Also, diapers. Don't use diapers. So it's possible worst things you can possibly use for that item. I guess for the NOAA data, I mean, I'm pretty happy with it. National Hurricane Center produces everything on their schedule, so it's always nice to see. I would like more discussion. I mean, I know I look at their forecast discussion, but Levy Cohen, Tropical Tidbits, does just like his videos are really like awesome. They're really good. I always learn about atmospheric structures, how hurricanes interact with land masses, stuff like that. So it's really a very excellent video presentation. I know that I think the WPC is starting to do some of these like brief Facebook posts. So maybe something like that from NHC would be pretty useful, I think.
Super helpful. Noted. So for my team and listeners on the NOAA side, more social media presence for hurricane information is what I hear. And that's largely for information dissemination and getting in front of our users sooner. Good to know about dog food and diapers. Interesting. So I'm going to shift over to Matt and Dan from our Hurricane Center for a quick question, and then we will go and review the questions that are coming in from the audience. And this is largely so that we can have our panel starting to think about how to respond to questions. So Matt and Dan, this one's coming to you. NOAA and you both have been giving presentations like this for hurricane preparedness for years, and this is a topic near and dear to our hearts, and we're very passionate about not only forecasts, data dissemination, but really to show communities and individuals that communities and individuals are often underprepared, not from a lack of information, but really for other reasons. So being on the side of the scientist and the information disseminator, we have over the years collected a number of best practices to help guide how users can incorporate and use our information. This is an opportunity. I'm asking our NOAA team, what do you wish that our industry partners and users and the listeners in the audience today, particularly those in supply chain and retail and architecture and engineering, what would you like for them to do differently? How would you like for them to use your information?
I don't know if Matt wants to start from the seasonal scale and I work down, or if you want me to start. away.
Sure. What I wish they would do, I kind of wish there was two things. One, ask NOAA to calculate a ton of stuff. Right? Like you have a data gap. If you're starting your process to prepare for the hurricane season, you go, I don't have a direct piece of data that answers that question or fills that gap. Work through the process here. I got people here that just love to calculate stuff all day on the team. We will make the computers. We'll create smoke out of them. Let's go. Then the other thing is really truly understand that preparing early, it's not a wasted activity in any means. Because if you prepare for hurricane season and you don't get a hurricane, right, in El Nino years also shift the winter storm track, and they bring a lot more flooding rains to the southeast. You have a lot more stuff. So like you may not use it during hurricane season, but remember, don't use the dry dog food even during a flood in the winter, right? Like use the sandbags, use the whatever other stuff. Like it's not a wasted opportunity. Right? We have fire drills in buildings, right? Just because we don't have fires doesn't mean the fire drill is wasted. So go through the steps, even mentally, as sit down and just do it over a tabletop exercise. I really wish people would do that more often, and then let us know when you're thinking through these things, right? And you're running your own tabletop exercises. What are those pieces of data? What are the things you need from NOAA? Because we are here to calculate and to serve and try and and get you all what you need, right? Because if all the companies and the private sectors and the engineers all have the information, right, then we're building more resilient buildings and having more resilient communities and having more resilient businesses, and it just scales up to where we're just better prepared.
Yeah, before Matt went down that road, I was thinking the same thing. I mean, I would encourage everyone here to engage, NOAA. I mean, and that's all of NOAA, but engage NOAA, the National Weather Service, National Hurricane Center. I mean, when you get from the seasonal look at Matt's forecast, we get down into the week 1 period and then the event itself. And if there's any information that you are not getting, let us know. We're very open to feedback, to looking at new products and services. We're always trying to evolve. We're testing things in house a lot. Looking at forecasts that go out further in time, looking at new ways to communicate uncertainty. We're looking at some new wind speed probability products. All that's happening internally to hope you have more tools for the future. But if there's something that is missing, don't hesitate to reach out so that we can make sure we are meeting your needs. And I say that because I know, and I know you all know, but so much of the recovery that happens after hurricanes is because of the private industry getting back up and running very quickly. And it's such a key component of that recovery process. Again, we want you to have the information to make those preparations, do what you need to do so that you can reopen and commerce and people can start getting the things they need to get themselves on the path to recovery. So we know it's important. So thank you very much for what you do. And also, again, for, reach out with the feedback. We really would appreciate it.
Matt and Dan, thank you. That's tremendous. Please look for the email that my colleague Vanina will be posting in the chat on how you can reach us in the interim. All right, now let's go through the Q&A portion from what's coming from our participants and audience. Okay, Matt, Dan, ready? Most of those are directed towards you.
Let's do it.
All right, first one. What do you mean about the cone shading being one shading for the entire 5-day cone?
Yeah, so previously when we issued the cone graphic, we had the first 3 days that were shaded, and then the days 4 and 5 were kind of hatched. Some people didn't quite understand what if there was a difference of meaning or not, and it really was just trying to highlight the longer range area of uncertainty. And so we decided with implementing this new operational cone to just shade the entire 5-day area as one color. There really was no distinction between it. Uncertainty does grow with time, so the cone does get larger, but there really is not much of a distinction between the uncertainty at the early part versus the later part of the forecast.
Okay. To the person that asked the question, if that is satisfactory, great. If not, please feel free to leave a follow-on comment. We'll move on to the second question. NOAA is doing tremendous work making hurricane data more accessible to industry. Where do you see the greatest remaining gaps between the information NOAA provides and the information engineers and scientists need to make real-world infrastructure resilience decisions? It's a tricky one, so many of us may be able to weigh in on this. And this will be a scientific perspective. So this is our view of the world on how we see the gap between the information that we provide and how we want our engineers to build resilience.
I can attempt to start. I think that's a really kind of a loaded and difficult question, to be honest. But to me, I feel like we at the Hurricane Center, after events, we do a post-storm analysis, and we really do try to provide a detailed information on the storm's history. We know it's used in a lot of different ways, and it really tries to capture the climatology and historical nature of these storms. But I do feel like that we still there still can be more observations out there of wind, storm surge, and others to really try to capture it even better. The number of observations has grown, and some of that is private sector. No, it is a combination of, again, government and private sector. But I think there's still always room for additional observations, for both wind, storm surge, rainfall perspective, to really try to capture what happened in an event. And I know that helps with things like engineering and planning for what could occur in the future. So to me, it's still probably a bit of a gap in some areas that, again, the government and private partnerships could probably help eliminate some of those.
And I will add to that. I think two things that will be helpful for the science team is to understand what are the specific thresholds of an incident or where you had asset failure under specific circumstances in specific locations. So the science and the analysis team really needs to understand from the engineering perspective, when an event or incident occurred, what were the exact specific conditions. Second is cross-pollination between the communities. So we invite our industry partners to speak at our meteorological and climatology conferences and meetings and discussions. And likewise, we are working really hard through this industry initiative to get our scientists and the NOAA information resources embedded within our economic sectors. So with that, just another plug, we do have one of these opportunities available to those listeners and participants in DC. Colleague Vanina will be putting that again in the chat. So ongoing dialogue and ongoing engagement really will help answer some of this question. I think the gap is wide. Often the gap is misunderstood. So it begins with talking first. Thank you for that question. All right, next one coming up. Is there any access to the products, such as wind shear and surge, that North American Multi-Model Ensemble and the UFS SFS is providing?
For short answers, no. The wind data that comes out of North American Multi-Model Ensemble, we pull that from some parts, some of the partners, not all of it. We could put it to our FTP easily. That's pretty easy to do. And the UFS is new. It's in beta, and I can put a request to that team to calculate wind shear. We do have it off of the existing model, the CFS, right? That's been in longer, so we can just point those codes at the new model and provide those as well. So I'll take this down as a request and see if we can get that up on the website, within the next couple of weeks.
Matt, is it fair to say, to facilitate engagement to the person that asked the question, one, please let us know who you are, because we would welcome understanding, what we make available, is it working in the context of your decision? But really, for us to really be beneficial, we also welcome learning how you would use this.
Yeah, because I may have to make it slightly differently, right? There may be certain different things that like meteorologists like to calculate, but they may not be useful to everyone else. So let's kind of do both.
Yep, thank you. So please reach out via the email that Vanina has put us and let us know who you are if you're interested in engagement. Okay, next question. How has insurance and reinsurance companies engaged with NOAA data, and what sort of feedback suggestions come from those folks? I invite my colleague, Allison.
Hi.
Hi, to weigh in and respond to this.
Yeah, We work really closely with the insurance and reinsurance sector. So they have been very engaged with NOAA as part of our industry partnership program for the last few years. We have a working group that meets regularly. And we also have an MOU between NOAA and RAA, the Reinsurance Association of America, to foster that collaboration further. So we hear from them that maybe where architects and engineers are thinking 30, 50 years in the future, some of our retailers are thinking 3 to 5 days in the future. A lot of our insurance and reinsurance folks are looking for data on events that have just happened or maybe within the last few years and putting those events into context. So one of the tools that we've developed with both the insurance sector and the retail sector providing a lot of input is our event footprint catalog, which is not public yet, but coming very soon. And this is a really exciting product that maps severe convective storms. So our first version will have hail and tornado, and we're hoping to add tropical cyclone wind to that as well. And it puts these, it creates these geospatial maps of the storms in ways that are really easy for insurance and reinsurance folks to download that data and drop it straight into their own catastrophe models. And that can help them expedite claim assessments or improve exposure analysis. It can also help retailers think about, better understand the vulnerabilities that they have to assets like stores, warehouses, or potential disruptions to supply chain networks. So I throw that out there as one example, but we also have a website focused on insurance and reinsurance sector where we've posted a lot more of those tools similar to the one we have for retail.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. One question that came in really quickly is, where can we find this new information? Vanina, can you please post the links? Thank you. Okay, we have a couple more questions to go through, and we have a couple of minutes. So for those that are listening, please ask away. This one is to Gabriel. To Gabriel Marcus, how the NOAA data products are shaping your infrastructure design. If you have, for example, a new warehouse to build, do you look at newer, stronger winds, or do you rely strictly on design codes per region? Great question.
All right. So I don't have a complete answer for you. Our buildings are constructed or designed by our architects, and they have stormwater specialists, everything like that. And there are a Costco Code of Ethics. You know, the number one thing in our Costco Code of Ethics is obey the law. So, you know, obviously we're going to obey the law, we're going to obey building codes, and we're probably going to design it stronger than the minimum. So, you know, new winds, enhanced rainfall. There's been a few AI models out there who said, you know, we're getting a lot more rain than the NOAA Atlas 14 suggests we would. We're taking that into consideration. I don't have very frequent conversations with our stormwater design team at our architecture firm, so I don't know. I do know that for, you know, the Gulf, we're looking at, you know, stronger hurricane or stronger wind construction. We've stopped using skylights, for example, because they have a lot of leaks on the roofs, and LED lighting is so much cheaper now. In Puerto Rico, we designed basically a Category 3 wind speed, and we have generators in all of our buildings. So, you know, we do factor in the climate and NOAA or data products for long term, but we use basically I think it's the ASCME wind data. Yeah.
Thank you. I think for our participants and listeners, you know, again, going back to thresholds, a lot of the analysis and a lot of the science questions that we often grapple with welcome the input of what the thresholds need to be or should be, or what the desired thresholds are from our users and our engineers. So that's an invitation from our research and innovation and analytics team to our practitioners and our users on, you know, give us the boundary conditions under which you want us to analyze certain parameters. Obviously, we are connected with standards and codes and those that you are required to follow. But oftentimes when you have events like Helene, and others that are extreme, they don't meet the thresholds. So we would be interested in exploring what the boundaries are that you want us to research on. All right, one more question, a couple more actually. I have two more. Gabriel, going back to you since you have the floor. What are the most effective ways for retailers to support post-event relief and recovery efforts, including partnerships with relief organizations? How are you working, or how is Costco working?
So we have a whole department that does community relations. We typically just donate like a cash donation to the Red Cross. We also collect Red Cross donations through our register. A lot of times people are asking us for like pallets of water. It's a really common thing, especially the Spokane wildfire. And we're not always able to honor those requests. In Florida, there was a bottling plant that basically went down because the hurricane damaged it. So they couldn't supply us. And if they can't supply us, we can't sell it or donate it. So that's really the kind of the factor. We have something we call days supply. You know, it is what it sounds like. How many days supply do you have of whatever item it is? And you know, for water, we're like running like less than a day, less than half day or something like that. So it sells almost instantly when it comes off the truck. So it's just kind of crazy. So it's really hard to balance that against customers who are there, or members that are there to buy versus someone that wants to have a donation or even a large volume of items to purchase. We do have a volume purchase program. Like you can get trailerfuls of stuff that sometimes even like a discounted price from what's on the retail or the warehouse for sale. But it usually takes like a week to get that. So it's not really the best option for immediate disaster relief.
Thank you for sharing that. All right, Matt, Allison, Dan, this one's a tricky one, so we're going to address the elephant in the room. And I think it's to let our participants know that we don't shy away from difficult questions. We may not always have the answer or the best one. So how have the administrative budget constraints impacted the current capabilities for hurricane forecasting compared to previous seasons?
I can just say that we at the Hurricane Center, we're prepared and ready as we always have been for the hurricane forecasting. We're requesting, hurricane aircraft. We're requesting additional observations as we've always done. So we're as good a position as we've ever been to, put out accurate forecasts. So thanks for the question.
Thank you. That being said, NOAA has done the best that it can, and it will always continue to provide the data and information services. But it really helps when we hear from our users on the needs, requirements, data dissemination, formats. So your comments really matter, and thank you for that. Okay, with the 1 minute remaining, I would like to say thank you to our participants for being part of this very important and what seems like to be an annual hurricane webinar. Your input, your comments, your feedback really matter to us and our team. And we ask that you please send us a note via the email that's been provided by Vanina. Thank you again for your time, and we look forward to reconnecting with you and encourage you to please check out the preparedness resources. Have a great afternoon. Thank you, everyone.